I forgot now.
Yes.
Okay. I forgot what Spencer wanted me to talk about. Spencer was pointing out.
Summit.
Oh, yes.
It's not something else.
Spencer wanted me to point out to everybody really quickly that the district is offering an MTSS summit. That makes it sound super official, right? Later in March, there are numerous classes that you can sign up for. I actually somehow am teaching one of them. I don't know. Just that's what everybody's like talking about expanding. I'm like limiting. So whether it's learning about interventions or the various factors associated with MTSS, definitely take a look on ESIS. You can see all of the different courses that are available. You can even go to mine if you wanted to, so I have somebody to talk to. Any questions about that? Okay, good. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Vaughn.
Okay, well, thank you very much for coming back and being here this afternoon. For today's professional development, one of the things that Career Ladder and Pei-Ling talked about was the notion of exploring race and equity and some of the impacts for us as school psychologists. My particular interest in race and equity was that I was on the bargaining team, and a really big part of the bargain was the district saying, we really value that we will start to have greater racial equity. We really value that we want our educating staff to be making a difference so that we won't have so much of the opportunity and achievement gaps that we see across the district. It sounded great, and then there was conversation about how do you actually implement that. One of the ways that that got implemented was an agreement to establish race and equity teams. Initially, they were going to launch 10 teams at 10 individual school sites each year. Since that time, there was so much interest that a number of schools just independently selected themselves, and they would try to partner with or sibling with, I don't know what language you want to use around it, but there was so much interest. So at this point, there are a number of schools that have gone through training so that they can become more conscious of conducting the process of education in a way that is more thoughtful about race and equity. My particular participation ended up that our school principal sent out a note with the application for the team that our school was putting in, and I thought I would be one of many people making a comment on the application. I was one of 2 people that made a comment on the application, so that's how I ended up getting involved with the race and equity work at Denny. I then proceeded to have the opportunity to participate in the race and equity team training that the Denny staff approved for trainer trainers.
Is your mic on? No.
We are getting to listen to someone.
Can you tell Kim to mute herself?
So today's event is inspired by, over the course of 8 Saturdays, several years ago, I participated in 4 to 6 hour Saturday trainings, and these activities are pulled from a couple of those trainings. My whole focus on today is that frequently we get experiences that are very much in the head. My goal is to get us out of our head and get us more into our hearts. So if you have not received the cards, let me know. And I have sets of cards. So would you be so kind as to, they're designated, there's 5 cards in each group. And I'm sorry for the people that are at home. There are not cards for you, but I'm going to ask you to participate in the extent that this feels comfortable. So what you're going to be getting on the cards are a series of features that help us identify ourselves as people. In it are listed the languages we speak, our gender, our core beliefs, key relationships, and there's one other, which for some reason I can never remember all 5, and racial heritages. So what I'm going to invite us all to do is for the next 6 minutes, so I'm going to set the timer. For the next 6 minutes, I want us to fill out those different cards. Now, you may want to do it as a headline. You may want to do it as a paragraph. Do it in whatever way that you determine. There's no specific direction about, well, what's my core belief? You know what is something that is key to who you are as a person that shapes you. I think it's fairly obvious, gender. But even gender, we may have individuals who identify as gender flexible. In terms of language, you may think both in terms of spoken language, but you may think in terms of written language. You may think in terms of the capacity to code. In terms of racial heritage, how do we identify that? In terms of so language, racial heritage, key belief, key relationships. So the invitation is to take the next 6 minutes and fill out those cards. Once you have done that, give me a signal that you are complete. Yes?
Can you just explain key relationship and core beliefs a little bit?
I just want you to think of what is a key relationship in my life? And in terms of core belief, what is something that really drives me? For some people, it may be their spiritual faith or their faith tradition. For another person, it may be that I really believe in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I'm not anticipating there would be a lot, but there might be like, I so love my capacity, my right to bear arms. That's the one that's going to be driving me, my core belief. So whatever it is that you identify as your core belief, as a core belief.
What happens to the cards when we're done?
More will be revealed.
Your name is not on them.
Your name is not on them. No, don't put your name on it.
Do you have any extra cards?
We're going to share cards at our table.
Relationship. Key relationship.
You're not allowed to have any.
Should I put on the back or no? They're going to be used for.
There's if you could
I'll just tear different.
get a piece of paper. Yeah. Sorry about that.
They're key relationship.
You have more cards, Bob?
I passed out.
No, there's the last set just left.
Okay.
I can fold mine in half and share. Unless we need full ones.
No. It's just it was easier to have 3x5
Oh yeah.
index cards. How are we on time? Whoever's done, give me a 5-hand signal. If you need another, I'm only seeing a couple that are completely done. So I'll give us 2 more minutes. So think about that constraint. I don't know if there's a way to. No, we took them. I didn't know if I should turn on a counter.
Oh, look at you being a middle school teacher wanting to put a counter on the board. And then they can do it like that.
Yeah, they've got that
Yeah,
all on their desktop.
It's a lot easier when the 6th graders are there to help me do that stuff.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now, for this time, my invitation is, rather than staying seated, I know that we're in that after lunch food coma, brain not happening as well as it usually does, may start to be settling in. So this is a time to be standing up. So bring your 5 cards, whatever size they may remain, if you've had to split them up or whatever size. And now what you're going to do is you're going to find a partner, and with your partner, you are going to have that other person take one card and rip it up. So you're going to find a partner, you're going to close it out because you don't know what they're going to take, and they don't know what they're going to take from you, and you don't know what they're going to take from them. You're going to take it and then rip it up. Go ahead, please.
Do they need to be nearby us? Or
No.
Do they select random?
Yeah, they're supposed to.
They select random.
We do,
Yeah, one. Yeah, right. Just rip up what it is. It's your discretion.
Are we supposed to look at it before we rip it?
No.
Should we rip it up to the point where we cannot read it?
I'll let that be your individual discretion. No, you just hold on to that. Okay, now. So the next thing I'm going to ask you to do is I want you to look at your remaining cards. Please look at your remaining cards, and I want you to reflect on what it is that you just lost. What it is that was just ripped away. And then share with your partner what that is like. How it feels.
Was that your initial reaction?
what I wrote down on my card was like, gender classified, restrictions, limitations, or I don't know, inconvenience. It's not like it really talks to guys. You expected to talk too much. It's always been kind of for me. It's nice to
Just one.
That was such a good one. Such a sweet
I lost
Okay, hello. now the next thing I'm going to have you do is find a new partner. Find a new partner. And this next time when you meet your new partner is going to receive 2 of your cards. And then they are going to rip up the 2 cards.
What do we do with these?
Confetti.
Those are confetti. You can just.
I like the ripping part.
Like that.
Can you like borrow some of the time and open it every time I ask? And so I lost the first 4 weeks.
It's racial heritage, the human relationships, the language, and it's gender. Okay, I'm going to have you do it one more time. You only have 2 cards left. One more time, 2 cards left. Find one other person who's going to destroy your final 2 cards. Final time.
We have nothing. And we can't talk about it.
Yeah, exactly.
So, one of the reasons for going through this process and having those elements of our identities stripped away is that many times when students come to school on a daily basis, their identities are wiped out. I hear that it got very silent. Think about it. What's it like if every day where we are coming to be, where we are coming and where we are expected to put out our best work, where we're supposed to demonstrate certain capacities, how does it feel if fundamental features of who we are feel like they're taken away? I work at Denny, and many of the students, 1/3 of the students, English is not their native language. I'm very fortunate at Denny because we have a dual language program, we have a great ELL program, we have funds that have been directed by building choice so that students have access to services. But I was at another school back when I first came back to the district where the student had no primary language. His mother spoke Pakistani, his father spoke Indian, his grandmother spoke a dialect that didn't even have a name that could be translated into English. And yet this student was not listed as ELL because the family didn't know how to fill out the paperwork. So when that student was brought to the SIT team, and the SIT team insisted that this child had to be evaluated, and I pushed back, much to people's chagrin, pushing back, saying, you know, how is it that we are making the assumption that this child has a disability when we know so very little about the language experience that this child has? And again, I just use that story to illustrate that I don't believe that any of those teachers were evil, that any of the staff bringing them forward was malintended or trying to do something nasty to the student. There was just not an understanding that as a kindergartner, that child's experience with using English could be very different and might have absolutely nothing to do with being disabled. The experience of that, or I should say the exercise of an experience of that, the intention is, how do we become more sensitive in our day in and day out dealings with the students and families that we encounter? How do we take the time to realize that there are so many factors at play? I think many of you know that I'm with another hat and in another setting, I'm a minister. So for me, people's beliefs are something that's very important. And I find that when I can wear that hat, sometimes I can make connections with families that I can't if I don't pull that hat out. Because some families are very faith-driven in terms of what they believe. When I can regard that family with respect for their faith, well, you know, Jesus is going to heal my child. Jesus is going to enable my child to read. Now, if I just diss that and think, well, I don't see Jesus coming in and doing a reading group with your child. I'm not seeing a small group session with Jesus or the apostles happening. So help me understand what's going on here. I think that kind of, it's humorous, but I don't know that that kind of blithe attitude is something that would help me connect with the family. So again, part of this afternoon is how do we start to generate a greater sense of connection? Each one of us have our own unique backgrounds. And our unique backgrounds are very different than the backgrounds of our families. But how do we start to see, rather than stripping it all away, how do we start to embrace what it is that all of our families and all of our students and all of our educators are bringing forward? That's one of the tricks. One of the keys is, how do we be looking from a resource perspective rather than from a deficit model? I know that it can be challenging because frequently, if we're looking for a disability, we're saying expressly that there is a deficit. And in all of our reports, and as the high school team looked at, one of the elements that you look for is, what are the strengths? So by considering these kinds of features, we can start to look at our strengths. Now, the next thing that I'm going to invite us to do, and I had asked people to bring some kind of journal, some kind of paper, for the people that were really trying to be very rule-oriented. If you brought a keyboard and you like keyboarding, that is not ruled out. The intent is to take some time, and there are two activities. The first activity is, I want you to think across your lifespan, and I want you to do a timeline of your encounter with racial and cultural differences. When is the first time that you encountered something that was mind-blowingly different? Start at that first point and then start generating a list. And again, the way you do it, it might be you just list out the dates. So I was 2 years old and my family was gathered together and there were dark people and there were light people there, and I hadn't seen dark people before I was 2 years old. I don't know much about it, except later on I learned that one of the dark people was someone who worked for my dad, and he came over for a company picnic that my dad was hosting. So however it is, wherever it is that you go back and you remember that there was something strikingly different, go through and create a timeline of each of our encounters with broad racial and cultural differences. Any questions? So you're going to generate this list. You're going to have about 10 minutes to work on this list of things. Just another thing to consider, the things on your list may be your experiences with media or culture that had an impact on you. Because we live in a day and age where media and culture really go hand in hand. There aren't too many children who haven't seen something on YouTube.
Good God, don't get me started.
I just saying.
know.
Absolutely.
Are we talking about when, are you asking us to write down when, like, there's all of a sudden made aware that there's a difference? Or when we first, like, societally made us aware that this is probably why this happened? Or when we first.
This is your individual account of your individual personal timeline. But those social events may have impacted on your personal timeline. Does that make sense, or does that answer your question?
Always.
We're at about 4 minutes left. We're left with about a minute. My invitation at this point is to just become aware of any emotions that have emerged as you consider your history, any observations, any reflections, because what we're going to do is we are going to be taking this list and we are going to have another 10 minutes to generate a written autobiography of ourselves as racially conscious people. So having reflected on our past history, we are going to be putting together in 10 minutes a personal autobiographical statement about ourselves as racially conscious beings. Now, why are we doing this? What's the goal of this? To the extent that Seattle Schools has committed to creating a welcoming space, our capacity as conscious individuals makes that more possible. To the extent that we don't have a capacity to reflect on that and think about it and talk about it, we lose that. One of the things that I shared with Michelle is that with hiring, there are going to be explicit questions about educators about serving in a racially diverse community. I don't know about any of you, but when I was hired as a school psychologist, and Scout did a great job in terms of interviewing me, but Scout never asked me how I was going to be managing children and families who were very ethnically and culturally diverse from me. How was I going to be working with that East African family that has a history of not wanting special education because back in East Africa, it meant that their child was going to be living 6 hours away? And how do I mitigate some of the fears that are associated with that historical experience with what's available here now? So, 10 minutes to write about, to turn that into an autobiographical statement. So the intent of those markers, those times in our life, is to be able to generate a statement. After we generate the statement, we're going to be getting into groups of 3, and we're going to be having a conversation about our racial, ethnic autobiographies. So please get started on your writing.
Do you have it doesn't have to be your own example, but an example of, is it like a one sentence? I mean, just what?
Yeah.
It's what you can write. It's what you can write in 10 minutes.
The Wyatt.
It's the combinations.
So a couple of possible starters are, you might want to take a key moment. When I was 6 and stayed on the bus too long, I ended up in a neighborhood that was very different from my own. I knew my phone number, and that nice African-American family helped me get back home because I got off the bus at the wrong place. That's an example. There was a time that I stayed on the bus too long. That might be how I would start the autobiography because that was a big deal. That was my first time as a 6-year-old coming into the home of a family that was very different than my family. And then letting me use the phone and seeing that their home was not the same as my home. So whatever inspires you, no one is going to be, I'm not going to be collecting these, I'm not going to be assessing them, so there's going to be no score, there's going to be no level or criterion. This is really an opportunity for self-expression, for self-exploration. And then talking about it afterwards, it becomes an opportunity to build on our own self-understanding and our own care for each other. Any other questions or prompts? What I really learned or what I really hated by doing this. Vaughn pissed me off so much that I had to participate in this. You know, whatever starter you want to use. If Vaughn hadn't made me do this is what I could have done instead.
Nobody's gonna.
Well, when I was on the set of Lost in Time.
There you go.
Sam Lee's Asian heritage struck me.
You won't believe it, but here's what happened. There's a story starter for you. I had a very similar experience when I was a kid. That's fine. Except we ended up in the wrong neighborhood in Alabama, and the state trooper was like, you got off on the wrong exit, you need to go back now.
As a grown-up, I took my kids to a military base, but inadvertently.
See, and that was my first, for me, growing up as a military vet, the cultural difference was not your ethnic background. If you were a non-craft, but you're weird, you know, there's just fundamentally different experience, right? I ended up in an elementary school that was like 98% military background. So almost 2% kids. For you? Totally different. Mm-hmm.
We're down to about 2 minutes. My proposal for how to engage in the next step is, since this is a small room with a lot of people, I would say that we have space in the library on this floor.
This room.
We have the room next door that we have access to. There are some chairs and tables. The district, you'll notice, has even purchased some kind of cushy looking chairs that are now located in different spots. So come into groups of 3, and what I'm going to say is you're going to have a half hour as your group of 3 to have a discussion about, share the autobiographies with the other 2 people in the group, and then take that time to engage in conversation about that. And then we're going to come back at 2:35, because I know people don't come back really all that well. So come back at 2:35, and what we're going to do is it's going to be a time for a share out, and the share out can be either what did I learn from my own individual experience, or what is it that I was really inspired when I heard Heather's autobiography. It really challenged me to do this. So take the next step for coming back, for listening, is how am I deepening my own growth, my own who I am as a person, and be able to share about that, or to be able to reflect on, wow, I'm really moved by another person. One of my goals is that there is so much wisdom that we all have, and we don't really get that much opportunity to encounter each other at this kind of depth. So find your 2 other people, find your perfect space, and come back to share out at 2:35.
I'm just going to pause the recording.
So thank you for coming back. Now it's just an opportunity to share out with the broader group some of those personal reflections, some of those, wow, aha, I'm really impressed from what I learned from one of my partner's things.
I was just saying I need chocolate now.
Oh, okay. So Ashley is sharing out about the power and value of chocolate as a...
Just want a paradigm shift, distract myself.
Okay. I can't really speak to chocolate as a racial equity component, but... So who would like to start? Okay, well, I will start. I had the opportunity to share with Lillian because she got started a little bit later. I hadn't realized, so she helped me understand a little bit about what it's like having come from Israel and some of the multicultural facets that are ongoing there, and how many of the things that we have in the United States really kind of mirror some of the things that have happened for her. So she was characterizing how in the state of Israel, anyone who's Jewish is welcome to be there, but there was a pecking order. If you were from Eastern Europe, you were the highest pecking order. So that was the Ashkenazi Jewish, and then the Sephardic were from Morocco and from the tip of Africa and the southern part of Spain and that part of Europe, and how as Israel over years went through a series of different cultures moving in. So there was a time that when the Russian people came in, the Sephardic family that Lillian participated in, suddenly their status moved up in the world. So they went from being the lowest class citizens to not being the lowest class citizens. And then people from Yemeni came in and they became the lowest class group. And so it was just a striking experience to know that it was a little bit comforting to realize that my country is not the only one that really gets to treat people like crap as they come in here. So that was a little bit heartening. So who else would like to share?
I think we got to parallel what it was like for some of us who grew up in a very multicultural environment where we maybe even had the experiences as a Caucasian person of being the minority, while others grew up in an environment where it was pretty much all Caucasian all the time, and how that impacted us.
Okay. Other reflections? Come on, we just came back from. Yes.
Well, I'll say, having grown up in a place that probably has a reputation for being a little bit segregated, which is Missouri, St. Louis area of Missouri, I thought about it, and it wasn't until I put it on a timeline that I kind of realized, so I spent about half my life there and half my life here, was that, probably the people around me, like my parents, who were socially more conservative than me anyway, politically not conservative, but more conservative than me, in their own kind of just good-spirited way, did more to integrate me or integrate themselves with other cultures than I've done here in Seattle as a progressive liberal who can talk a good talk, but don't make it a point to have dinner with somebody or something. So I got a lot out of it, really.
Thank you.
Yeah, so just seeking out just regular, symmetrical, friendly relationships with people, taking a social risk to be somebody's friend, rather than just the paternalistic relationship we have, say, in our jobs with kids. I learned from that. It was a little eye-opening. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess I found a similar parallel to you, Gordon. I grew up in northern Michigan, and it's one of the places where my more features into those bills where you sign up for a bank account, you get a gun. So that's where I grew up. And I started thinking, and I don't have similar beliefs to my extended family there, but it was really hard for me to pinpoint, how did I not end up staying in northern Michigan with similar beliefs. So it was interesting. We were talking a lot about travel, and my mom was a little bit of a black sheep in her family, and travel and seeing the world, and she was an art teacher and museums and just exposure to different things. So that was interesting too. Just what did our parents do to maybe change our viewpoint or expand our views. I found it really difficult to have this conversation too without thinking about gender and sexuality and size and just ableism. So we brought in some of that conversation too. But I think it was definitely interesting work.
Perfect. Thank you for expanding it. My intent was not to cut it off, but
sure.
I was just
that would take days.
I was just trying to have a launching point.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Thank you. Are there other all group share outs? China.
A lot of our conversation was about a lot of what you guys spoke about, but something that was interesting to me is that, like I was sharing, we're all parents here, and it feels like parents of minority children have to do a lot to make their child feel welcome and safe and feel like they're getting a quality education where you might not have to do so if you are not a student of color or your student can pass along with the majority population, and it feels pretty frustrating to feel like you have to go the extra mile to make sure that your family and your child is equal to other families and children here. And so I asked a lot of questions about, what do you guys do as parents of children who are not children of color to expose your children to other cultures and things so that can hopefully change in the future, especially when Seattle is so segregated and a lot of your experiences are based on the neighborhood that you live in and the children that you go to school with. So if you go to a school where there's not very many minorities, how are you making an impact as a parent or as an educator to make sure that people are getting exposed, children are getting exposed to other cultures and religions and disabilities and all of those things?
I think that's one of the things that we talked about, that I shared, that my husband and I are explicitly having those conversations, raising two white males, about, because I think that it's safe to assume that as a white male, when you are conscious of everything that's going on in the world, you're left thinking, okay, so I'm given these privileges. What do I, like, how do I go from here? What do I do? How can I make this better? And so not just expecting my two boys to randomly grow up and figure it out on their own, but having those conversations with them now about how they can contribute positively to the collective, as opposed to just, I'm just going to sit here in the corner and hope nobody notices. But having those conversations, to tell people to have those conversations, right?
Shane.
Yeah, I thought that I think you brought up the comment about parenting and kind of the conversations and stuff. I definitely agree. I think, even with my own son, who's actually a mixed race background, my wife and I actually have a lot of intentional conversations around racial identity and what that means for him. What's also interesting, as I took a step back from this process, is that my wife and I are a little bit removed from our own cultural experiences because, number one, our cultural experiences were very much immigrant-based. Our families are from another country. And because of our working situation, our working environment, we do have to somewhat whiten ourselves. And so as we go home sometimes, because we're from different cultures, we do just sort of act in a way of like how we act in every day. We just kind of wonder about our children and their own racial identity and what that means for them and how far removed is that going to be for them. So we do have intentional conversations that we try to go beyond just the food. We try to go more about culture, but it can be pretty difficult. I think also as people of color, and when I think about my kids, we don't necessarily have an option to work in a world where people, the majority may or may not look like us, right? Whereas sometimes I hear from other people that, oh, it's about options and parenting. If I want to get to know someone of color, I might need to set it up. Or I might need to, as the parents might need to do this. Whereas I think sometimes for people of color, we don't really have that option. Like we have to interact with white people, and that's okay, right? But I think it's about options and just being mindful about that.
It's a really good point.
So my invitation is, I just want you to give yourselves a pat on the back for playing my games. I want you to be aware that some stuff may bubble up. We've gone through a number of processes today, and it might not hit you until a week from now, or 2 weeks from now, or a month, or a year. Sometimes there are things that emerge that will hit us emotionally in a different way. So my invitation is just to, again, acknowledge yourselves for the work that you did, for playing along. Also, be gentle and kind with ourselves as we consider how we are as people with our own sets of baggage. You know, as a white man, I have had countless privileges delivered to me that I've never had to work for, that I've never had to do anything for other than the way that I was born. That's a very different experience from the women that are in this room and what it is that you encounter on a daily basis. It's something that I'm conscious and continually aware of as a father of 2 daughters. And, you know, both of my daughters are fairly radical in terms of their politics, which makes me very happy. But at the same time, you know, things that I don't think about, they'll turn around and say, "Do you realize that this is going on?" And there are so many things that are on their radar that they can bring to me that trigger me. So the other piece is that while each of us have our own sets of blinders, we also have people in our lives that can open us up. So again, just acknowledge the people here that have helped us to open up, to look a little bit deeper. Acknowledge, I just want to give praise and acknowledgement to all of the women psychologists, because I know that the work that you do is never acknowledged or is never paid for in a relation to what it is to be a man in this country. I know that for everybody that is not born white, Caucasian, that there are countless hurdles that have been dumped in front of you. And all I can say is that it's my commitment to do whatever I can as a privileged person to undermine and to blow up those privileges that have been available. So how do I be a conscious agent of change and support to the people in my life who inspire me, who help me see beyond what is immediately in front of me. So thank you all very much. Have a great day.